Thank you for tuning into Literary Blend, a publishing podcast. I'm your host, Demi Michelle Schwartz. There's no perfect recipe for chasing a dream in the publishing industry, but I hope the conversations on this show give you the ingredients you need to bake yours into reality. So let's flip the page and get into this chapter of Literary Blend. Hello, friends. Welcome back to Literary Blend. Today's chapter is called Querying from the Agent Perspective, and joining me on the show is a wonderful literary agent I am delighted to have a conversation with. Please give a warm welcome to Anne Rose. Hey, Anne.
Hello. Do I leave time for applause tracks or something here? No, probably not.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing this fine day?
I'm doing fantastic, and I'm so excited to chat with you about querying from the Asian perspective. But before we get into that, I would love for you to share a little about yourself and your journey in the publishing industry so far, both as an agent and an author.
How much time do you have? So let's see. As an agent, I guess I kind of did the math. I think this is my fifth year. I guess now maybe my sixth year into agenting. Since I don't even know. But before that, I was an intern. But I mean, where do I start? So 100 years ago, when I was much younger than I am now, my niece asked me. She came to me. She's like, "Auntie, will you read books with me?" Because none of her friends none of her friends wanted to read books with her. And so I was like, okay, sure, no problem. You just tell me what to read. I'm going to read them. And we had our own little book club, right? So we did that for a while. And then one day she calls me and she's just bawling her eyes out. She's like, "Auntie, my favorite character died." And she is just completely inconsolable. And so what does a good auntie do? She goes, "Oh my gosh, I love you so much. I'm going to write you a book." Duh, right? So I decided I was going to write her a book, and in the process of doing that, I was like, well, if I'm going to take my time to write this thing, maybe I should figure out this whole publishing deal, right? So I started looking into what publishing was all about, and I got an internship, and I was interning for a literary agency for a good hot minute, and yeah, so that's kind of the long, short story of how I got to where I am, both writing and agenting.
That's perfect. Thank you so much for sharing. That's so funny. She's my favorite character died.
Yeah, she was so sad. I remember I was shopping. I was in the middle of Macy's or something. And I'm just on the cell phone, and she's just like, "Dude," I'm like, "Oh my god!" I'm so sorry. I love you.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. Okay, perfect. So let's dive into our chat about querying from the agent perspective. And the first thing I want to chat about is manuscript wish list, which this is where it all starts. The agent has their manuscript wish list, and authors look at it, see if they're a good fit. So when you're putting together your wish list, what are the different factors that you take into account to put that together before sharing it with authors?
I try to be as specific as possible, right? Of what my tastes are and what I'm looking for, but I also don't want it to be so narrow that authors can't see themselves in that, because basically what it comes down to is that these are the general vibes of what I'm searching for, but I am aware that a lot of authors will be like, well, my book doesn't have X, and she says she wants X, but they might have Y, and Y is close enough to X. So I think that there has to be some kind of give and take that goes with the wish list, but generally speaking, I try to be pretty specific, pretty these are kind of the things that I like, that I don't like, just to give authors a better kind of view of who I am, what I'm looking for overall, and just my general vibe, I guess.
Okay, yeah, and how does the current market and the work your current clients are working on also affect your wish list?
I mean, to say that it doesn't would be probably disingenuous, right? But at the end of the day, I am looking to champion books that I believe in. And so even if the market isn't necessarily calling for those books, doesn't necessarily mean I won't try my hardest to sell them and champion them.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I like what you said about how you put in the wish list what you're looking for, but you're not so specific because Just flashing back to when I was querying, when I saw wish lists that were like so specific and my book checked all the boxes and then I got rejected, it was like, but I gave them what they wanted. But like looking back too, when I queried the agent that I'm currently signed with now, we weren't even that good of a fit. She just had a couple things that I matched with, but I liked her general vibe and things like that. And I was like, well, I'm just gonna query her anyway and see what happens. And she's my agent now. And so I think sometimes, especially like when I was querying too, and I know other authors are like this, they kind of take manuscript wish list as the law. It's like if I'm not a good fit, they're not going to like it. And if I'm a perfect fit, they're going to like it. And I think I learned myself that that's not always the case.
That is 100% accurate. Yeah, there's so many times where I mean, people will even be like, on your manuscript wish list, you say you want this, and they'll send it to me, and it still quite isn't scratching that particular itch. And it's really hard to be like, yeah, but no. And those ones are really, really tough rejections to send.
Yeah. Yeah, and then you also mentioned too that you mentioned things that you're not looking for, and personally for me, I think anti-MSWLs are sometimes a little more helpful because then you know for sure you're not sending the agent something they don't want, whether it's just like a preference thing or a trigger for them. I think like when you have the wish list, you have the guidelines of things that your book may fit into, but the anti-MSWL is really helpful too, so authors aren't crossing any lines with things you definitely don't want to see in your inbox.
Yeah, I mean, I try to add some in there. I don't want to generally say no to everything, but I mean, there are some things that are just I could probably 99.9% of the time say that they won't be a good fit for me. So I do
Yeah.
list them on there.
Yeah. Perfect. So now let's shift into actually like doing the querying and all that. So I know you try to keep your query inbox open all the time, but you've had to close a few times. So for you, just to give insight into how chaotic it gets, how many queries you get, and the timeline as well with wait times and things like that.
Well, let's see. I get between roughly 5 to 6,000 queries in a year. So that's a lot. This last year, there were so many good queries that were coming in, and I held on to a lot of them to like be like, okay, I'm going to go back and look at this one. I'm going to go back and look at this one. And but the problem is that I just didn't have the time to go back and look at those ones. And so, like, even this morning, I was in my query box. Finally, I haven't had a chance to get in there for a hot minute. I had queries in there from May and June, and like I feel so terrible. But at the same time, it's like I really wanted to take some time and like look at those and see what they're all about. And I have this thing where I can see potential in almost everything that comes into my inbox. I'm a writer, like, right? You're a writer. Like you see the nugget. You see what the author's trying to do and you're like, "Oh my gosh, there's lots of good things here." But at the end of the day, I can't take on everyone. Like right now I have 200 maybes in my inbox. I cannot take on 200 new clients. I can't do it.
No. No, and I really like how you brought up how you're an author too, and you understand from the other side. And I think that's really great to know that there are quite a few agents who are also authors. And so I'm pretty sure like they understand it too, that it's hard to pass on stuff. I've seen so many tweets, passing's the worst part of the job, passing the worst part of the job. But you're exactly right. You can't take on everybody. But when it comes down to determining whether you're going to reject request or put it in your maybe pile, what are some of the major like red flag turnoffs that make you reject, and what are the things that make you request and or put that in your maybe pile?
I mean, the immediate no's are pretty easy. They're sexist, they're racist, they're homophobic, they're fat phobic. Like they're problematic on like on a level that you just can't overlook. So those ones are quick, easy. Nope, this isn't for me. I don't generally like stories where a woman is assaulted in order to propel the forward plot of the main male character. I just don't like those. I I talk about it a lot, and I really have a hard time when a manuscript starts with a character waking up. I really do because I just see it so often. So it would have to just have the most absolutely compelling query hook for me to get past, Bob awoke as your first line, for me to keep reading that one. Just because I see it so often, and I say, don't send this to me, but yet I see it all the time. So, so I guess those would be some of my major ones.
What about when it comes to requesting? What do you look for in the opening pages in the letter?
I'm looking for like a really strong hook concept. Like, I really love when I can connect to what the author's intentions are for the book. I've had a lot of authors that in their bios, I love reading in the bio about, like, what inspired you to write this book and how you're connected to it, or, and not every story has to have that, but if there's a really strong intention behind it, a lot of times that will also just make me even more want to read the pages. So that is a huge thing. And then voice obviously is really, really important to me. I want to be able to just sink into that opening page and be like, okay, yeah, I want to keep reading this. This looks really, really good. Um, and since I get 6,000 queries a year, like it has to hook you really, really quick. And I know that is so hard and mean to say, but at the same time, I wish, but I just don't have the time to, read the entire full package, right? I have to make some snap decisions sometimes.
Yeah. So going off of that, whenever you have a letter and you have the sample pages, obviously if there's something in the letter that is basically just letting you know this is not for me, then you just reject without reading the pages. But if you're like on the fence and if the query letter isn't the greatest thing ever, do you tend to still go to the pages and consider it from that? Or if you just don't feel hooked from the query letter at all, or you're not super sure, you don't kind of go onto the pages, you just pass on it?
So as long as there's nothing stand out that it's super problematic in the query letter itself or the synopsis, because I do read synopsis, I will read pages. So just do your best for the query and the synopsis. That's all you can do. As long as I get a general idea of the, goals, obstacles, stakes. That's more or less all I need to jump it into the pages. So I do try to always look at pages, unless, like I said, it's just, oh, okay, well, this is super problematic. I can tell from the query.
Yeah. Well, I'm happy you brought up a synopsis because I was actually going to ask about that. Everybody doesn't like them from the author perspective. I hate synopsis. Like, they're the worst. I rather write 50,000 query letters and books instead of a synopsis. But obviously, like, it does play a role. So, what are you looking for in the synopsis, and why do you personally find that as a good tool from the agent point of view?
So I really am looking that it's a complete story, right? So is there, a place where we start? Is there some sort of rising action? What's the journey overall of the story, right? Like, I want to know what the main character. I generally gravitate to things that are more character driven versus things that are more plot driven. So I want to see like the character either making actions or inactions that keep moving the plot, right? So I'm kind of looking for those things, and then I'm also looking to see how an author ends the story. I really want to see all the twists and turns, and I want the spoilers. So when I'm looking at the pages, I can be like, oh yeah, this is a reliable narrator, but I can see exactly how they're doing this, and oh, I want to be able to point out like the brilliance of the work. Like, I don't need you to surprise me. I wanna be able to be like, "Okay, I know what you're doing here. Oh, I'm seeing you doing, oh, yeah, this is brilliant. I love this." And then be able to follow along with it along the way.
Okay, perfect. So let's move on to you requested, you got the full manuscript, the author sent it to you. Now you're diving into the full manuscript. So, what are some of the typical reasons why you pass on a full?
Pacing.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, pacing ends up just kind of if they don't call it the murky middle for a reason, right? Like, for no reason, I should say. So, yeah, when just it kind of stalls out, you lose that character agency. You just lose sight of what the story was promised to be. So, those would be reasons.
Yeah. Yeah. So going off of this, when it comes to feedback, I know like authors want the personal feedback, but if you get 5 to 6,000 queries a year, there's no way like you would be spending your entire year giving personalized rejections. But I did get one from you. You did give me a personal pass. So, like, when it comes down to the personalized rejections or the form rejections, when it comes to the full, do you tend to give personalized feedback? And with the queries, when are the instances when you feel like you can get personalized feedback and when you give a form?
Oh, these are good questions. So I guess part of it's feeling, right? Like part of it's like a feeling like, do I think that this author would be open to hearing what I have to say or think about this? So that's part of it. Obviously, I don't know every author, but we do take a small risk every time we give a personalized rejection without really knowing how the author is going to interpret that feedback on whether we're doing good or not, right? Like, so our intention always is to do good, but authors don't always receive the message in the same way that the speaker is giving it to them, I guess would be a good way to put it. So that plays a role into it, like how brave I guess I am feeling at the moment on whether I can offer something that I think will be useful and will be received well. So that's one part. Another part is just time. Like, okay, so I'm sitting down on the weekend and I might have a little bit more time to provide that personalized note or something that I see that really kind of sparked with me. So that's another factor. When it comes to fulls, I do generally try to give a personalized reason, but sometimes it's just there's nothing inherently wrong with it. It's just not like clicking in some way, and there's nothing more that you can say. It's not bad. It's not wrong. It's so again, I try to give as much feedback that can be helpful, but sometimes even I'm at a loss for words.
Yeah. Well, I'm really happy you gave all that great insight because I can definitely see how you're in a position of wanting to say something but not sure how the author's going to take it. And not wanting to do harm even though you intend to do good. And so I completely understand. And the other thing too about wanting to give some kind of feedback but just not knowing what to say, if it wasn't a good fit, it just wasn't a good fit. And as the author, it's like sometimes it's hard to hear that, but sometimes that's all it is. And honestly, like when I was querying, when I would get the rejections that were like more personal, like I liked it, I connect to it, but it just wasn't for me. In a way that just hearing that was enough because it told me that I was on the right track and there was nothing majorly wrong with the story. I just needed to find the right champion for it. And so I think sometimes when the personalized feedback isn't super deep, where it's listing all these things that are wrong with it and it just wasn't a good fit, I think that can be seen as a positive as well. So, when it comes down to determining whether or not you're going to offer, say you have a bunch of foods on your desk and you really, really like them all. And obviously, like you said before, you can't sign 200 clients. So, what is your thought process when it comes down to picking between foods that you genuinely loved and you can see yourself representing, but choosing which authors to offer to?
Oh gosh, that's hard. That's so many hard questions. I don't know. I think it's just a feeling that you have to get. Like you have to. I was thinking about this morning actually, as I was thinking about my clients and my list. I'm not just necessarily building a list. Like I'm building a community. So I have all of my authors are very friendly with each other. They all have open conversations with each other. We have different ways where they can connect, both online and offline. So I think that that's also kind of something that I think about when I'm offering rep is will they add, will they like the little family that I'm building here? Like will they get along? Will everyone be able to be good together? So yeah, having that like I think being an agent and having authors on your list like you're building like this community, you're building support system, like an in-house support system. So your authors can have places to go and soft places to land when because the publishing industry is tough. So you need a place where you can go to and just like laugh and cry with each other and you're gonna be okay. And it's safe.
Yeah. I love that so much. And recurring theme here is like it's a feeling. Like it's a feeling if you want to, offer or keep reading a manuscript and things like that. And honestly, I think this just comes back to how we are as readers too. Like if we're reading a book that was a massive New York Times bestseller, I've stopped reading books sometimes if I just wasn't connecting. That book wasn't bad, it just wasn't for me. And it's always a feeling like when you read a blurb, like, oh, I have to read this, I'm interested in this. Or, with you signing clients, it's a feeling I can see myself working with them. I can see myself bringing them into the community. And so a lot of it is vibes, but you are definitely taking strategic, thoughtful approaches too. But I think it's really great that you're sharing how there is a feeling aspect too, and this gut feeling that kind of lets you know yes or no, because there's not always a very clear, straight answer for things. Sometimes it's just something you're feeling about the situation.
It's such a subjective industry that at the end of the day, like you could have this most amazing. I mean, obviously, I think my clients are amazing. I think their books are awesome, right? But sometimes they don't sell, and it's crushing, right? But it's just that's just the way it is. It's subjective. There's no other way to put it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, leading off of that, the last question I have for you before we have a fun part of the show is what is the biggest piece of advice you would give to any querying authors?
Gosh, that it's rough. I respect that it's rough. I've been there myself. I queried myself for a very long time and didn't get an agent and shelved projects and did all of the things, right? Like I've done all the things too. So, don't be too hard on yourself. Don't beat yourself up if you're getting rejections. It's just it's a big numbers game too as part of the whole thing. Find your people, right? Find the people that you can talk to and DM with and rant to and cry to and celebrate with, because I think that's also a really important part of the overall picture.
Yeah, literally, my author friends are my rocks. And I think what you said there, like, have the community because going through this alone is really difficult and you don't have to. You can build your community, have your friends. Because honestly, like, no matter what stage, if you're querying or if you're agented and on sub, like, everybody's getting rejections along the way, and once you get an agent the rejections don't stop. And so I think having people who understand or are in the same boat and they know what you're going through, it just makes the process less difficult and more enjoyable, because when your friends get offers or book deals or whatever, like, you can celebrate with them. When things happen for you, they celebrate with you, and it's just a really great thing, and it makes the whole thing a lot easier to handle.
Yeah, exactly.
Perfect. Well, Anna, was lovely having you on the show to talk all about querying from the agent perspective. But now this brings us to the fun part of the show, which is called the plot twist. So,
Uh-oh.
as authors and readers, we love plot twists, and as an agent, I'm sure you love plot twists too. And so, I'm going to ask you a question you could have never seen coming, and believe me, this is a fun one. Are you ready?
Okay.
So, your name has a flower in it, Rose.
Okay.
And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you two genres, and I want you to tell me what flower you think best represents the genres.
Oh, all right. I'll try.
So your two genres are romance and horror.
Oh, okay. So, that's a good question. So I think that for romance, I'm a fan of the peony, right? The peonies. I don't know how you say it, but I think those are a very romantic flower, right? Like they have lots of layers and depth, and they don't bloom all the time. So they're special and unique. So I'm going to go with that for romance. And now for a horror novel. I mean, I guess it could be cliche to go with the oleander, right? Because but like maybe like a lily, right? Because they're simple, but they're also like they're just like they're beautiful, and you kind of get lost into the simplicity of them, but also like I don't know, so I'm going.
Oh my goodness, perfect. That was fun.
Woo! That was a tough one.
Fabulous. Well, thank you so much for joining me. And this is where I would love for you to share anything you would like to share with querying authors or anyone listening about your books. So, where can people find your wish list and query you and learn more information about what you have going on as an author?
Sure. Okay. So for me as an agent, you can find me at the Tobias Literary Agency. That's where you will find a link to, well, you'll get some general idea of what I am interested in there. I do have a manuscript wish list on manuscriptwishlist.com that goes into a much more in detailed look at some of my likes and dislikes and that kind of thing. I do try to do lots of these podcasts or interviews to also give you an idea of who I am on a basic human level. My own book, which I'm very excited about, is coming out in September, and it is called The Seemingly Impossible Love Life of Amanda Dean. And so I do hope that you will add that to your TBR and maybe even buy a copy. And I hope that you love it. But, you know, that's just
Fabulous. Well, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to talk to me on the show.
Well, I appreciate you having me. This has been super fun, and I can't thank you. Thanks so much.
Yeah, absolutely. And that wraps up this chapter of Literary Blend with Anne, all about querying from the Asian perspective. If you enjoyed our conversation, please consider giving the podcast 5 stars and leaving a review to help others just like you discover it. Also, if you have friends in the publishing industry you think would be interested in the show, please pass it along to them as well. Thank you for listening, and until we come back next time, happy reading and writing.